So this comes about the Patrick put here something. Who would you sell weapons to? I mean, sometimes it has to be done realistically.
Well, I'll answer honestly and say I wouldn't sell arms to anyone.
That's what I thought.
But I do think that clearly sometimes there is more of an argument to be made in some cases than others. The reason I made the point about Hamas was I wanted to make clear that in opposing arms to Israel, I'm not opposing arms sales to Israel. I'm not siding with Hamas. But it was clear in that conflict Israel was attacking civilians in the occupied territories it's got no business being in the first place. And whether or not it technically committed war crimes, it certainly behaved in a way that most people in the world, including most people in Britain, regard as aggressive.
There's a lady at the front who had a hand up. Yes, you wanted to say something.
Yes, given that the quality of life in the UK today and the security of this country can be attributed to the UK's militaristic history, how ethical is it for the UK to decide which countries it's acceptable to provide weapons to and which it isn't?
I mean, it's a fair point, Patrick. I mean, is it all right to supply arms to sort of little groups of rebels against a dictator, but not to a country like Israel? I mean, where do you draw the line in this?
I think you draw the line. At the end of the day, Her Majesty's government, be it one party or the other, has got to take a view and say what is actually in the interest of the people of this country, what that actually means in practice as economic prosperity, and hopefully being able to live in peace. And sometimes that means something unattractive in the real world. It means my enemy's enemy is my friend. So we have the unpleasant prospect, well, it's not a prospect, it actually happened, that at one stage we armed the Mujahideen, because in those days they were our friends because they were against our enemies, and now we find there are weapons on the other side. That is the trouble. We live in a fallen world. There is no easy, clean way of always being able to get the arms trade right.
Is there anybody that you wouldn't sell weapons to? I mean, obviously, your view is a realistic one, well, cynical one, however you want to put it. But are there some regimes you think
Derek,
beyond the pale?
Yes, Derek. If you like, make me an offer. I mean, I can't imagine it would ever be in our interest to supply the government of North Korea. But I can understand how once upon a time a government thought it was a good idea to supply the Mujahideen.
Yeah. But
can I just say?
Can I give you an example? Indonesia. Would you sell arms to Indonesia that would be used?
Well, then or now?
Now, that will be used against civilians in West Papua.
Well, you see, right away, you say, because they will be used against civilians in Papua. I don't know that that is necessarily so.
But you know that Indonesia is attacking civilians in West Papua. That is well documented by Amnesty and other international NGOs.
Yes, but, well, you say that it is well established that they're attacking civilians in Papua. Look, we're not going to have a debate here this evening, I think, about the rights and wrongs of Indonesian history. But you cannot, hang on a second, you cannot turn around and say, I take a particular view about what Indonesia should be doing, and therefore I say we should never supply
whether it's okay to bomb civilian villages in West Papua with BAE planes.
Look, hang on a second. A moment or two ago, you said you wouldn't supply arms to anybody. Now you're trying to do a horse trade with me to find out what countries I would sell arms to.
Well, I'm putting the question back to you, who wouldn't you sell arms to?
I'm simply not going to do that. What I am prepared to say to you is this, that sometimes governments, and Labour governments as well, have to say, where are we now, and might it be in Britain's interest to carry out that particular supply? Now, I am prepared, if you like, to get my hands dirty and to admit that sometimes you've got to make that judgment. Your position, which you've been honest enough to say, is I don't have a problem with that because I wouldn't ever sell arms to anybody. Now, that is fine. That is very, moral, but it doesn't actually get us anywhere in a fallen world.
What I said was that there was some...
It's the opposite of utopia.
Was that there was some... there were some situations in which there's more of a case for selling arms than others. It is well established and well documented that Indonesia has used its arms against civilians in West Papua, and even those civilians who resort to violence to resist Indonesia are basically armed with little more than knives because the population is so brutally suppressed there. They have been bombed from the air, and civilians, including children, have been killed by the Indonesian military. And it seems to me that if we're going to have even the slightest restriction on the arms trade on ethical grounds, then that rules out selling weapons.
But Simon, surely, I mean, realistically, even if Britain, even if the European Union said we're not going to have any more of this anymore, I mean, look at what the Chinese are now doing in Africa. And this is really all about foreign policy influence, isn't it? It's not about, high principle, rights or wrongs, ethics. This is about raw politics of getting people on side. So your dream would just cut off a European view completely, wouldn't it?
That's a fair point, I think, and that's why we have to work at an international level. That's why the Arms Trade Treaty, which Ian mentioned, although it's so limited, I'm glad it's coming. That's why we need to lobby for more international treaties that go much further, and we need to operate at a global level.
Thanks, Simon. The gentleman with the hat on. Second from the back. Yes,
that's, part of a realistic world, because the gentleman on this side is talking about a fallen world, and you're talking about an ideal world, and we'd like an ideal world where nobody sells arms to anybody. It seems to me, by listening to the argument, that as long as there's money involved, then anything will necessarily go, and they would probably sell arms to, and probably do, to Indonesia, as much as they sold down to Saddam Hussein, who bombed or committed genocide against his peoples in Iraq, and then it turns out to be the nemesis that we end up having to get rid of. So I think whilst money's involved, there's no real argument as to what is ethical about the arms trade. It's about money, and that's basically it.
Good point, thanks. Before I come to the panel, yes, sir, you're on the right-hand side with your arm. Yeah.
Just like what he's saying, I want to understand what qualifies a group or a country to be a customer of BAE, because from what you're saying, it seems as if you're ready to sell to whoever is ready to buy.
I think what...
Patrick, I think somebody...
Sorry, no.
No, you go,
what qualifies a country to be a customer of BAE is that it's got money to pay for the weapons. BAE's never shown any other requirement, although it does appear to abide by...
Probably like every other company that's in business, isn't it?
Well, by those kind of companies. But that's why, in a couple of weeks, the chair of BAE is giving a lecture on the importance of ethics in business. Because they're aware that people know that an ethical arms trade is an oxymoron, and so they're desperately trying to peddle this.
That comment completely stand, because it's not completely true to say that they can just sell to anybody. The Department of Trade and Industry has rules.
Yes,
they've got to go to them, get approvals, and there are times when they're not approved. So, what the standards are, when they are and when they aren't, I can't say, but it is known that there are times when they don't get what they want in terms of selling to certain countries.
Richard, does your organisation monitor things like this, when the Department, Ministry of Defence and the Foreign Office issuing these licences? Is that a thing that, as a direct action group, you follow? Or
we do that, although, as I say, I still stick by the view that effectively arms dealing it's a tool of foreign policy. It's not the case that BAE perhaps can just sell to whoever they like, and I think that's regulated as part of it. And I thought this is rather sort of narrow-minded and parochial point of view. Unfortunately, we now live in a situation where the global problems afflict everyone, and the idea that we are going to be able to sit behind secure borders and escape from the 21st century, and by manipulating realpolitik on behalf of an elite in this country, is going to be a solution, I find totally unacceptable.